Oh, no get money, I make the can work still. Because not a good work. If we get money, now we should see that.
7-year-old Yila is getting ready for school. School that's paid for by the daily work he does at the Godrich stone quarry. Yila's father was forced out of school by Sierra Leone's brutal civil war. He was 13 years old when rebels attacked his village, and he was forced to flee to Freetown for safety. If Yila didn't work, he'd have to drop out of school as well.
Each quart contains 2 pints also. So if you have 5 quarts, we'll give you how many pints? Huh?
Sierra Leone has one of the lowest literacy levels in the world. Only 54% of school-aged children can read. Those who go to school spend half the time working to supplement their parents' income.
Because of this problem, most of them came late to school. Because their parents, they are very poor. They have to assist them to do some work at home before coming to school. Yes.
500 children work here. The rocks from this quarry are used for road building and house construction. Rosalind Hoagbao, a social worker, has been working with this community for 4 years. She's been trying to encourage families to save money collectively and invest it as a group to secure the future of their children.
How do you feel? Where do you work with your papa?
I don't feel fine.
You know they feel fine? What do you know?
Brookstone.
The Brookstone in Hat, eh?
Yeah. I can't be papa for Brookstone, but who's in the pool for school fee?
You know, easy. Now, when I'm on, the chance no day. If chance they possibly you can find yourself now. Before I go thief, I make a come by the stone. I hope say work all day. I must get what they eat me in picking.
You know, as we are just coming from a brutal civil war, life is not really easy for an average Sierra Leoneans. This is the only way the children will come in and complement the efforts of their parents by finding money so that they can take care of the medical, health, clothing, food, and school fees.
It's a special day for Aden and Marion. They've been waiting a very long time to leave Dadaab refugee camp and to start a new life with their son. Ten years ago, thousands of Somali Bantu fled the civil war in Somalia. Alone, without clan affiliation or protection, many were raped and murdered. Thousands made it to Kenya. Since then, some 12,000 Somali Bantu refugees have lived in the Dadaab refugee camp in northeastern Kenya. But they remained a minority among a Somali majority. There was no refuge for the Somali Bantu, even in a refugee camp. But the Somali Bantu were victims of persecution long before they became refugees. Their ancestors were captured in Malawi, Tanzania, and Mozambique by slave lords and sold in Somalia over 200 years ago. In 1999, the United States designated this group a persecuted class of people who deserved to be resettled in America. During the next 2 years, as many as 12,000 Somali Bantu could be approved by U.S. immigration officials for resettlement. But because of its proximity to Somalia, Dadaab camp was considered too dangerous for U.S. officials to visit. IOM was charged with relocating the group from Dadaab to Kakuma refugee camp. But before relocation could begin, IOM staff carried out a road assessment to evaluate security, medical facilities, and the availability of food and overnight stops along the 1,500-kilometer, 30-hour road trip.
the agreement was made that these refugees would be moved from Dadaab to Kakuma, and that's how the process has started. Almost 50%, more than 50% of the Somali Bantu have arrived in Kakuma, and they are going through the process of screening, and hopefully in the near future all of them would be resettled.
At the IOM assembly area, Aden is still quiet and cautious. But once on the bus, he says the Somali Bantu have suffered far too much and for too long.
Sometimes if you try to go to look some firewood in the forest, you might face different problems. If men go to the forest, they might face the beating and some harassment problems. If the women went to the forest, they are just facing also the rape and whatever. That's a major problem of the camp.
Mohammed, his wife Binti, and their 3 children are also looking forward to a new life. Today it's their turn to relocate to Kakuma. Since mid-June, IOM convoys have been relocating the Somali Bantu refugees. For many, it was their first bus ride. Most had never left the confines of the refugee camp. For new mothers, the sick and the elderly, the prospect of flying is daunting. They quickly adapt and take their seats in the IOM flight that will spare them the long and bumpy road journey.
The vulnerable group here, we are talking of below 1 year, the late pregnancies above 28 weeks, we are carrying them by air because of the distance from here to Kakuma, the elderly above 60 years old, and anybody who is sick or has been discharged from the hospital recently and recuperating. So we are carrying them by air.
Mothers are taught to use a diaper. It has been a long day filled with unimaginable experiences for this group of Somali Bantu. But they're all happy to be moving to Kakuma and are excited about the prospect of starting new lives in the U.S. As the IOM buses arrive in Kakuma and the Somali Bantu descend, the tension in their faces dissipates, and big smiles can be seen everywhere.
Even if you ask most of them who are here, how do you find life in Kakuma? They tell you we can't even compare it to anywhere else. And most of them actually say they don't want to imagine how America is because Kakuma is already like America to them.
To accommodate the Somali Bantu in Kakuma refugee camp, IOM built a new transit camp and processing center.
I'll ask you something else. If we talk about immediate situation, is they go to their houses, they go to the food distribution center where they're given their food, they're given firewood, they're shown their shelters, and after that we have JVA, Joint Voluntary Agency, doing the interviews and form filling. And then we have the U.S. Immigration INS coming in to do the approval of this group or rejection of this group. After that, IOM does the medical screening, cultural orientation, and the movement from Kakuma to the U.S.
By the end of September, all Somali Bantu will have arrived in Kakuma. The majority of those approved for resettlement in the U.S. will leave Kakuma between January 2003 and June 2004.
They're in for a big change in their lives when they get to the United States. They'll be cared for, they'll be
To the people fleeing famine in Somalia, these makeshift shanty towns on the outskirts of the sprawling Dadaab refugee complex in Kenya offered little in the way of comforts. They are overcrowded, there isn't enough water, and they can be dangerous as well. But now, there is somewhere else to go. A new camp, known as EFO 2, opened 2 weeks ago. Hundreds of people are now moving each day to the new site, dismantling their old shelters to make the journey. They start off on their own, But then they're given transport by UNHCR and the International Organization for Migration. Some 5,700 people have moved to IFO 2 since the new camp opened August 18th. UNHCR is planning to move a total of 30,000 into the new camp by November. It's a journey that many in the shanty towns are anxious to make. Shurye Salat Farah is the father of 4 who lost his livestock in the drought. His family is one of the first to go. They are looking forward to a safer place.
habeenkii cabsi waa jirta marka dadka wareegaha oo jirayda oo marka dalka marka dalka annaga leh xanuun baa laga cabsadaa duurjoogtana saa oo kaleento duurkan hadda marka annaga hay'ad guriyana ma siinino markaan oodan aan doonano duurka marka aad bay noogu dhibaysay dadka dal kale annaga leh aad bay noogu dhibaysay.
The trip to the new camp is by bus. It's 10 kilometers away. But at journey's end, there is the prospect of something better. Security, water and latrines, medical services, new tents, and there will soon be a school for the children. Henok Ochala is UNHCR's Emergency Response Coordinator in Dadaab.
Life on the outskirts was not really very good. People were living in very, very unacceptable conditions. They were not having enough access to shelter, enough access to water, enough access to sanitation. Education is something that we have not been able to provide at all. They didn't also have very good security coverage simply because they were living in a spontaneous settlement. The government security authorities that we are working with in Dadaab, they have no obligation to provide security in those areas where the people were living prior to their relocation to these sites.
UNHCR continues to register people every day for the new camp. When they arrive, families are given basic living supplies like jerry cans to carry water and blankets and cooking pots. And of course, a new tent.
marka dhibaato un baa hadda aan ku joognay qarib shaqo la'aan yaan ku joognay hadda guri wanaagsan baan helay guriga wanaagsan oo markay hadda ay soo dhaweeyay waa marka aan ku farxay.
Shurye's family lost everything they owned in the famine. What they have now is not a lot, but it's shelter and safety, and for that they are grateful.
Usually leave your last on tilapia fin farine. Quand il y a bonne tilapia fin farine puis m'entrer dans tête moi mal couché. Quand il y a puis me déguer en retirer du moi me dormi connu. Et puis me faire comme en serviette pendant m'entrer. Quand il y a comme monsieur qui dit bal faut parer moi dit non pas capable parer bal yo menti moi dit bien grand monde là. Il dit non faut que parer me veut dire pour me sortir à côté coordonnatrice Kofa vive et puis li ba mon calotte pété bouche moi et puis moi courir malé il get en frapper matin il fait ka déjà sur moi il fait 100 vidéo faire un mois vidéo sur moi.
Shirley Christoph's family members died in the earthquake of 2010 that killed approximately 300,000 people and left hundreds of thousands living in temporary camps throughout the country. She now lives alone in this sprawling tent camp by the airport.
Quand sous piste là même, ça est pire. Sous bien garder va pour ravine, il va jamais venir nettoyer ravine. Tant que la pluie tomber, l'eau a monté, l'eau entre dans caille tout le monde là. Gon toilette là pas jamais laver. Les fini ouais gain des bagages de l'eau la château d'eau, il va venir depuis matin on peut venir ba un goût d'eau jeudi dimanche. Oui, na comme connait yo. Puis faut comme connait yo, me toujours jeune car ami qui a dit ça. Ouais, ça bagage qui terrible. Le fin violer dans camp ou tourner dans camp parce que un côté pour aller. Même moun ça qui te force à la garder dans jeu et la dit l'autre moun ça l'autre moun a plongé de dessous. Assez vigo. Là, c'est tout moi, c'est la moitié, c'est la dormi, c'est la fait tout ça me fait. Moi, mon prêt là, qu'importe un monde qui t'a besoin de fonds, depuis pas son gilet, la chire, la faut pas carrer en moi, et pas en mur, et pas en bois, et pas en tôle. Un programme à resettlement là pour jeune cadre pour bon kit, faut que monde qui gagne là, faut que obligé coucher. Obligé pas gagner, on pas obligé de mourir, obligé à bailler mon coucher, obligé à vivre la situation ça.
While rape in the camps is widespread, it's difficult to say exactly how many women are raped or forced into sex for food. Because perpetrators of rape are so rarely brought to justice, few women feel safe officially reporting the incident.